We are living in the most dumbest time in American history. Everything is an argument. Everything is a debate. People can't define what is a woman. Can women get pregnant? And these are teachers, doctors. And it baffles me because y'all love to say, oh, Donald Trump loves the uneducated. But y'all are as dumb as it comes. Y'all don't have no common sense. I can't believe we're arguing about having to show an ID when you go vote. It's simple to get an ID. The problem is y'all want to cheat. Y'all want to continue cheating because y'all let millions of undocumented, illegal immigrants come through that border. And y'all want all of them to vote blue. That's the problem. And y'all already know that y'all dug yourself in a hole and everybody sees through the bullshit and the lies. Thank God that we are living in times where a lot of people are waking up. A lot of people are getting saved and encountering a relationship with Jesus Christ, and they see the truth. It's impossible to not have discernment when you're walking with God. It's a battle against good and evil. It's not rich or poor, black or white. If you're spiritually dead, you're not going to be able to discern it. You guys didn't get it when Kamala said you're at the wrong rally, when somebody said Jesus is Lord. That is the party of perversion. That is the party that hates God. That is the party based on lies and division. They're paying people to keep us separated. Don't be too pro-black that you become the Antichrist. You have terrorist groups that hate America. They have American blood on their hands. But y'all want to leave the borders wide open. Y'all forgot what happened with Osama bin Laden that quick? Y'all forgot about our beautiful Twin Towers? And I'm sick and tired of y'all keep talking about the Epstein files. Those files was on Biden's desk for the longest. He never released them. Now that Donald Trump released them, y'all still want to talk about that? Why would Donald Trump be so eager to release files that Biden already had? Y'all, Epstein was a demon crash. Y'all need so much proof to know the truth, but y'all believe the lies real quick like that? Wake up, sleeper. Rise from the dead and Christ will shine on you. Dive into your Bible. It's time.
That was powerful. And I had to let her speak because sometimes the most important thing you can do is actually listen instead of jumping in too early. And what she said hits on something deeper than just a moment. It taps into a bigger, much bigger conversation that's happening right now. Whether people want to acknowledge or not, there's this growing idea being pushed that somehow you have to choose between your faith and your cultural identity. And I'm going to be very direct. That framing creates more problems than it solves. It puts people in a box that forces division instead of clarity. And look, you may have people reaching out saying you only refer to certain groups. Let's say, for example, when it comes to faith and Christianity, right? I have this happen to me before. Oh, you only refer to certain groups as brothers and sisters. Um, when you really think about that, right? When you're united in faith, you will understand as you spiritually enrich yourself that we are brothers and sisters in Christ. So we uplift each other, meaning that we are imperfect, made in a perfect image, such as being on this earth with our own differences, such as in purpose and uniqueness. But no matter how you put it, we all go through similar stories when it comes to trials and tribulations, which then helps the next person along the way, such as our brother and sister, right? So when you say brother and sister in faith, it's a shared belief, shared values, and shared alignment. And that goes beyond appearance, background, or anything surface level. And that's where this conversation becomes important because when people get pulled into focusing on differences that don't actually drive outcomes, they lose sight of what really matters. Division, especially over things that don't lead to solutions, weakens people. It weakens communities. It weakens institutions. And when people are constantly arguing over identity instead of building around shared purpose, progress slows down. That's not emotional, that's practical. Strong groups are aligned, weak groups are divided. So when I hear messaging that encourage people to separate separate based on categories instead of uniting around values, I have to question whether that's actually helping anything long term. Because if the goal is growth, stability, and impact, then unity has to be rooted in something deeper than surface level identity. And it has to be rooted in principles. So what we're going to do today is break this down piece by piece, keep it grounded, keep it clear, and focus on what actually really matters in the world. So hit the like button, share the video, subscribe to the channel, and then I want you guys to check this out.
I walked away from the Democratic Party after being a registered Democrat for over a decade. I was an activist on the left for like 20 years, and I was raised a Democrat. But I walked away because I realized that the modern Democratic Party does not reflect the values of liberals anymore, or certainly doesn't reflect any common sense values, not in my opinion. But a lot of the reasons why myself and other liberal-leaning individuals voted for Barack Obama were because a lot of his policies and ideas. And those same policies and ideas are now demonized by the Democratic Party. For example, Barack Obama was very strict on our border. He deported the crap out of people. He implemented travel bans from certain countries for we all know what reason, right? And most of us liberals, we were like, hey, dude, you're doing a really good job. But then fast forward a few years, which I had TDS for the longest time, but fast forward a couple years, now Donald Trump's doing it, and now the entire Democratic Party is like, this is bad. This is bad. We cannot have borders. Borders are invisible lines. This is stolen land, and everybody who comes here should get free health care, even if they're here illegally. And if you don't believe us and you don't agree with us, then you need to be wiped off the internet. You shouldn't be allowed to talk because you're racist and you're xenophobic and you're uneducated and you're a bigot. That's where the Democratic Party has went. They also, like, I was a huge advocate for legalizing same-sex marriage because myself and a lot of other liberals were like, equality, equality, equality. But now we have the mainstream Democratic Party who's doing the exact opposite of advocating for equality, which, I mean, at this point, what do you advocate for in this country? But they're advocating for equity, which is the freaking opposite of equality. Okay? So it's like a lot of these liberal ideologies and liberal policies that have been forefront in the Democratic Party, at least in my lifetime, are now bigoted. They're now bad. They're now not reflected at all within the mainstream Democratic Party. And so what did that leave me to do? I had to go vote for Donald Trump. The first time I voted for Donald Trump, I still had TDS, but I was thinking it's better than voting for those people who are raising their hand on the debate stage saying free healthcare for all. I'm like, I can't do that because I want more affordable healthcare. Who doesn't? Barack Obama, in my opinion, didn't do a very good job, but it's going to make it worse if we try to give free handouts to the whole wide world. I'm just saying. But either way, I encourage all the liberals, and I know more people see it now than they did in 2020 when I walked away. But if you're seeing what I'm seeing, walk away. You don't have to become a Trump fan. You don't have to become a Republican. You don't have to become right wing, but be done with the Democratic Party because they do not represent you. They represent progressive socialism, not liberalism. They actually wish really bad things on you and I. Trust me.
Now, when we get into this clip, right, the main thing the speaker is expressing is a sense of disconnect, right? Feeling like the political space she once identified with no longer reflects the values she originally supported. And whether someone agrees with her or not, that kind of shift is something a lot of people experience over time. Political parties evolve, priorities change, and individuals reassess where they stand based on what they're seeing. And she brings up examples like immigration policy, healthcare, and the difference between equality and equity. And from her perspective, those shifts represent a move away from what she understood as core liberal principles. Now, and it's important to look at that carefully because conversations around border policy, for example, have changed in tone and emphasis across different administrations, and people interpret those changes in different ways depending on what they prioritize: security, humanitarian concerns, economic impact, or a combination of all three. The same goes for healthcare. There's a wide range of positions from incremental reform to more expansive coverage models, and where someone lands on that spectrum often shapes how they evaluate proposals. When she talks about equality versus equity, she's pointing to a real philosophical distinction. Equality focuses on equal treatment or opportunity, while equity looks at outcomes and disparities. And that conversation is happening across education, business, and policy spaces, not just politics. Now, she also raises concerns about how disagreement is handled, specifically the idea that people who don't align with certain viewpoints can be dismissed or labeled in ways that shut down dialogue. That's something people across different perspectives have pointed out, and it ties into a broader issue about how open conversations are managed in today's environment. Because at the same time, it's important to recognize that no political party is a single unified voice. There are a wide range of perspectives within any group, and what gets amplified publicly doesn't always represent every individual within that group. Her decision to vote differently reflects a personal prioritization of issues, which is ultimately how most people make political choices. Now, when strong labels get introduced into the conversation, that's where it's helpful to step back and focus on specifics, policies, outcomes, and measurable impact, because that's where real analysis happens. The core takeaway from her perspective is about alignment, truthfully. Do current policies reflect the values people believe they're supporting? Or is there a gap? And that's the question underneath everything she's saying, basically. Now I want to go to this next clip. I want you guys to check it out. As the conversation moves further, it shifts into a stronger claims about history, identity, and what it means to align politically or spiritually. I want you guys to see this.
You should get out. It is a party of slavery from 1800 to 1860, the party of the Confederacy from 1860 to 1865. It's part of Jim Crow from 1865 to 1965. You guys vote for this party. You know, okay, yeah, Christians are at the party, but number one, I'm just going to say it like this, like my good friend Charlie Kirk said. If you are in the Democratic Party, you are not a Christian. Plain and simple. Can I make that any more binary for you? The God gap shows white liberals making the fools out of y'all. And if you're a Christian, you shouldn't be with these people and you shouldn't give them power. So if you are giving them power, you're not a Christian. Get it? Good. So we going to be on this side. Y'all going to be on this side. We going to get it on because we don't get along. And I'm going to keep bringing this to you because I'm here to wake you up.
And this is where it's important to bring in some structure so things don't get oversimplified. When historical references are used, whether it's slavery, the Confederacy, or Jim Crow, it's true, those are part of American history, but political parties have changed significantly over time in terms of leadership, voter base, and policy priorities. So, drawing direct lines from past eras to present day platforms requires nuance, not just comparison. Now, the bigger issue comes in when political affiliation is used as a measure of someone's faith or personal beliefs. That's a strong claim. And in practice, people of faith exist across different political perspectives, often prioritizing different issues based on how they interpret or understand responsibility, morality, and societal outcomes. That doesn't mean everyone is right on every issue. It means real world decisions or real world decision making is complex. And your point actually adds an important layer here, which is that being politically conservative doesn't automatically make someone a follower of Christ. And being part of any political group doesn't fully define someone's spiritual standing. Those are two separate categories, okay? Even if they sometimes overlap. Where this conversation becomes productive is the idea of doing the due diligence, right? Actually looking at policies, understanding agendas and action. Does this align with what I believe is right? Right? Does this align with what I believe is right, effective, and sustainable? And that's a responsible approach. But when the conversation turns into absolute statements about entire groups, it tends to shut down that kind of thoughtful evaluation from a systems perspective. That's where division increases and productive dialogue decreases. And when dialogue decreases, it becomes harder to solve real problems. So the more effective approach is to stay focused on outcomes, accountability, and measurable impact. What is being proposed? How is it being implemented? And what are the results? And that's where clarity comes from. Now I want you guys to check out this clip.
A few months ago, girls in my school found out that a biological boy was allowed to use the girls' restroom. When we spoke up and said that we were uncomfortable, the school board basically said that it didn't matter. They said girls being uncomfortable sharing a bathroom with a biological male was not grounds for any action. Think about that. Teenage girls like myself stood up and said that we were uncomfortable and scared, and adults told us to just deal with it. Some of us, like myself, just started avoiding the bathrooms altogether. Some younger girls are scared to even go in the bathroom. This shouldn't be happening at school. Girls deserve privacy, girls deserve dignity, and all girls deserve adults that actually listen to them.
I actually agree. That's why I hit the bell. Now, when you look at this clip, it brings a completely different level of gravity to the conversation because we're no longer just talking about policy disagreements or cultural debates. We're talking about what real oppression actually looks like in practice. A 19-year-old losing um, his life for expressing a desire of freedom. You have a young teenager right here. We'll get to that clip with the 19-year-old. But also, I'm just saying in general, you have teenagers being impacted. Okay. And with this last clip that I'll show next and this clip here, it shows a form of conformity, it seems, being pushed in a way where it definitely jeopardizes basic human decency, such as respect and respect for opposing genders, let alone the vicinity in which they are surrounded around each other to conduct each other respectfully. And there's a time and a place, right? Right. So when you look at that, right, the 19-year-old losing his life for this expressing a desire for freedom, which I'm about to show in the next clip after I speak to this as well, because they're both teenagers. Um, what you have to look at for is that's a reality that exists in certain parts of the world. And to force you to step back and put things in perspective, because in environments like that, there's no open debate. In this case, she felt in her own school district there was no open debate for the simple respect of young women, right? The next generation, right? And I say all that to say, and there is no ability to challenge authority without consequences, right? And because in environments like that, there's no open debate, there's no protected protest, and there's no challenge to authority. You just get punished for not complying. And that's the difference between a system that allows disagreement and one that suppresses it entirely. And this is where it becomes important to be precise in how we use certain terms like oppression, authoritarian, or fascism. It carries weight, and when they're used loosely without comparison to actual conditions where rights are stripped away completely, it can dilute the meaning of those words. That doesn't mean people shouldn't speak up about issues they care about or push for change. Those are fundamental parts of a functioning society. But it does mean those conversations should be grounded in reality and context. Because when perspective is lost, it becomes harder to distinguish between discomfort, in this case, as you see, with her touching on, men being in women's bathroom and so forth, disagreement and true injustice, right? And I want you guys to hear the input about this 19-year-old that I kept referring to in this last clip. And I'm going to tie it all together with the bathroom situation and the 19-year-old getting their freedom taken away from expression. Their thoughts, right?
I need every single American liberal that has the privilege of freedom that participated during the No Kings protest, so say protesting our fascist dictatorship government, to come to the front and have a seat. This was 19 years old Saleh Mohammadi, who was executed by public hanging yesterday in Iran. His crime? Protesting the Islamic regime. He was captured back in January and executed yesterday. He was exercising what is right here in the United States, a fundamental civil rights. He was hanged at the age of 19 for envisioning a free Iran. Despite the US pressure and the global plea for the regime to release the political prisoners captured during the protests. He was a wrestler world champion that represented Iran, bringing home the medal and honor. This was a senseless, blatant political execution by the Islamic regime to continue terrorizing their citizens. He was only 19 years old, an entire life ahead of him. His only crime, wanting to live in freedom.
Now let's tie it all together. Now, when we look at this clip, right, involving students, and this brings the conversation into a very real, practical space, how policies and decisions affect people on the ground, especially in environments like schools, where there is an expectation of safety structure and clear boundaries. What this student is basically expressing is a concern about privacy and comfort. And regardless of where someone stands on a broader issue, the kind of feedback should be taken seriously. And any well functioning institution, especially one responsible for young people, leadership has to balance multiple considerations while ensuring that individuals feel safe and heard. And when concerns are dismissed without clear communication or thoughtful solutions, trust begin to erode. And that's what's happening. And it's a shame what's happening to our youth and let alone young people of their trust being eroded because once trust is weakened, the environment becomes more difficult to manage effectively. Now, different people will approach this issue from different perspectives, and it's a complex topic that requires careful handling. But at the end of the day, what shouldn't happen is the simple fact that the acknowledgement, let alone the awareness, should not be, turned away from or ignored, but it should be acknowledged to even be able to have a productive conversation. And it goes back to the beginning, right? When I said in the beginning, it seems as though when you don't align, like that, for example, with the woman who basically dissociated herself with the Democrat Party because they went so far left, that even if she did say a different perspective or a difference of perspective with her, with her Democrat Party affiliation at the time, they just pushed her out. So it goes to tell you that these systems aren't really for the best interest of the youth. And also, it becomes to advocate from the example with the Democrats that is party over people and not the people and the citizens, that alone the American taxpayers being a priority. And when you have a system like that, it tells you that power, greed, and control trumps all. And it comes to feel as though this situation, as though with this 19-year-old that I showed you in the last clip here, that eventually got his life taken away, a 19-year-old um for speaking his thoughts, right? That's what it all comes down to. That's what the Democratic Party looks like, and that's what is coming off of the energy in regards of a regime. Because once you don't go along to get along with the Democratic Party, they push you out, they demonize you, and basically you're very well hated. And that goes to tell you that for a 19-year-old that you see right here, from 2007, he was born in 2026, passed away, losing his life for expressing a desire for freedom is not a political talking point. That's a reality that exists, right? And it forces you to step back and put things into perspective. Because mentioning how words like authoritarian and fascism carries weight, they are used loosely without compared to actual conditions when rights are stripped away completely. It can dilute the meaning of those words. And that doesn't mean people shouldn't speak about issues they care about or push for change. Those are fundamental parts of a functioning society. But it's hard when you have a society that's quick to demonize you and basically push you out because they want what they want. And at the end of the day, it gives off narcissistic vibes. And there's no way you can be productive or continue to be on the right side of things if it's only a one-sided perspective, right? So at the same time that freedom comes with responsibility, the responsibility to engage thoughtfully, to stay informed, and to use that voice in a way that leads to constructive outcomes rather than just noise should not be overlooked, right? And when you look at that, right, systems where people can openly protest, speak freely, and advocate for change without being imprisoned or worse, that reflects a level of freedom that shouldn't be overlooked, right? And so the takeaway here is about perspective, accountability, and understanding the difference between imperfect systems that can be improved and systems where basic freedoms don't exist at all. If this gave you something to think about, drop your thoughts down in the comments below. Uh, share the video and subscribe to the channel. And it just also seems like the Democrat Party is going down that way, of demonic vibes, sitting there and making sure that they make you conform to what they want for their own political agenda rather than actually caring about the people who put them in office. But I want to close with this, right? Because the purpose of being the light and salt of the earth is to bring clarity, preserve what's good, and stand firmly in truth while navigating a world that often lacks both balance and perspective. So when you look at that, right, Matthew chapter 5, verses 13 and 14 says, "You are the salt of the earth." And as you seen this 19-year-old young man, unfortunately, who lost his life due to speaking his freedoms, and then you see the 19-year-old, you see the young woman who basically expressed her discomfort with the bathroom situation. You are supposed to be the salt of the earth, but if the salt loses its saltiness, how can it be made salty again? It's no longer good for anything, right? Except to be thrown out and trampled underfoot. So you are the light of the world. A town built on a hill cannot be hidden. And what this reminds us is that influence is not just about speaking, it's about how we live, it's about how we respond, it's about how we carry truth into every situation we encounter. Salt preserves and light reveals, which means we are called to bring stability, clarity, and accountability in environments we are a part of. And that includes how we engage in conversations. And I use these examples in these clips to show how far gone things have come and how we need to get back to being rooted in a very grounded principle, and these basic things should not be overlooked, because how we evaluate what's happening around us and how we respond to both justice and injustice, it's not about adding to confusion or reacting emotionally. It's about standing on truth in a way that actually produces order and direction. In everyday life, that means being thoughtful with your words, grounded in your principles, and aware of the impact you have on others. So the question becomes, um, when people encounter you and the way you engage with the world, are you bringing clarity and truth into the situation, or are you adding to the confusion? But let me know what you guys think down in the comments below. I'm curious. I feel like not only is it a direction in the political landscape, but also how it affects the next generation coming up, let alone the state of, everyday life, and how our leaders are governing to the point where it can seem as though we are not fully engaging and being productive entirely because certain things are being overlooked to prioritize political agenda, no matter the cost, over power, greed, and leverage, right? All that is in the sentiment of evil for own selfish needs instead of truth, and which things are set in place for a reason to serve. Like our leaders are supposed to serve the people, but it seemed to be backwards, especially as you heard with the Democrat Party. And no party is perfect, but um it also creates the conversation that we should have productively to make sure we're on the right track and hold public officials accountable, just like we hold ourselves accountable, and continue to be better individuals every single day. Catch you next one. I hope you guys got some value from this. As always, love you guys. Peace.